Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and we got Ariana Grande and Lil Durk this week, cause it's Billboard Breakdown.
I don't remember.
Alright, I'm back at home and hopefully something close to being back on schedule. Recovery on the main channel is going to take a while, there's just a lot to get through, and thus it's interesting that this week feels both more and less busy than I expected. Yes, there was album impact for both Lil Durk and Ariana Grande's deluxe release, but not so much that it overpowered the charts, and they both fell into my small album bomb rules. So maybe this just be easy enough to get through, fingers crossed? Well, let's start off with the top 10, and I'll admit, I'm a little bit surprised that Luther by Kendrick Lamar and SZA is still holding its own at the top. I don't think anyone could have really predicted that this would have the longevity it does, especially with no video. If I'm as petty as Kendrick Lamar is, I saved that video for when Drake tries to make his full push, but we'll get to that. But in the meantime, yeah, dominant on radio and on streaming. It doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, minus a big surprise smash. You never know if that happens. And that leaves Die With A Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars pretty comfortably at number 2. With radio now in slow decline alongside weakening streaming, this isn't about to compete for that top spot yet again. What is competing, sadly, is Nokia by Drake up to number 3. This is making the play with big streams and sales, plus the video. The radio push has started, but the question will be whether it can beat any of the margins, and while the virality is somehow still going, it's going to be a timing game for any larger boost. It was predictably enough to get over a bar song Tipsy by Shaboozey at number 4. No surprise, because albeit a decently stable week across the board, it is still on the downswing, and that could open the door for Pink Pony Club by Chappell Roan at number 5. The streaming and sales are both up, and the radio push is there. It just feels like a margins game to really get any higher. And it is comfortably over Lose Control by Teddy Swims, which is still at number 6 because it had a good streaming week, and the radio is just not getting rid of the song. Not to mention the spike for Apartment by Rose and Bruno Mars at number 7, which is also getting dumped, just not very quickly. The calendar year for 2025, mainstream music has felt kind of slow to me, and the fact that so many older songs have stuck around, that's a big reason why. Now granted, if the replacement is a double dose of Morgan Wallen with Just In Case at number 8 and I'm the Problem at number 9, blame both on streaming here, although the radio grabbed up more of the second one, not a good sign. Maybe some of those songs should stick around, at least the better ones. Case in point, Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish sneaking back into the top 10 at the bottom because the radio still isn't giving it up. I can't really complain. Now this takes us neatly to our losers and dropouts, and the latter group actually had a couple big names. Too Sweet by Hozier is finally gone, alongside I'm Gonna Love You by Cody Johnson and Carrie Underwood, which will probably have a year-end list spot, I think handily so. Something I will not say for Voy a Levarte pa Puerto Rico by Bad Bunny, or I Ain't Sayin' by Jordan Davis. Feels kind of ironic in a way for that last one. And we actually have a pretty respectable list of losers here, so let's start off with the expected album impact losses. From Playboi Carti, we have Rather Lie with The Weeknd down at 35, and Evil Jordan at 50. And from Selena Gomez, Benny Blanco, and Gracie Abrams, we have Call Me When You Break Up down at 60. Then from Morgan Wallen, we got Smile somehow down at 58, and I'm a Little Crazy slipping off the debut to 30. Don't celebrate too much with this, they're gonna rebound with the album when that comes out. And also off the debut, This Town's Been Too Good to Us by Dylan Scott mercifully fell to 80. Finally, we got Tweaker by LiAngelo Ball, about done with any viral moment at 92, and Tattoo by Tito Double P just not really catching fire at 99. Now we got very few returns or gains this week, and the returns are, well, kind of odd. Why exactly are we giving Feel It by David another chance at 86? Or Fix What You Didn't Break by Nate Smith at 95? Neither of these songs are that good for a second wind, all I'm gonna say. Thankfully, our only gain is pretty solid, with Weren't for the Win by Ella Langley finally getting some Nashville radio traction to 69, but I'm not sure this has as high of a ceiling as I'd hope, at least in the charts. But again, we are in a small album bomb situation for both Lil Durk and Ariana Grande. They both got 6 songs to chart this week, so we're gonna focus on the best, the worst, and in the top 40. Outside of that, Well, let's handle Lil Durk's messy and rather frustrating songs first. Keep On Sippin' at 96, Shakin' When I Pray at 94, Can't Hide It with Jhene Aiko at 84. God, Jhene saves this mess so definitively. 1,000 Times with Lil Baby at 83, pretty solid Lil Baby verse, funnily enough. And They Wanna Be You with Future at 72. And for Ariana Grande, Hampstead at 59, although the pettiness ripping into stan and tabloid culture was remarkably endearing, Ariana Grande is one of the few for me who could make it tolerable. Warm is at 54. My god, why is it mastered to sound so compressed and tinny? Let the song be lush, it would be awesome. Past Life at 53, and the expanded intro End of the World at 42. But now on to a much shorter list of new arrivals, starting with number 93, Morena by Neton Vega and Peso Pluma. Not gonna lie, it's hard to get all that interested about a new track from either of these guys. I don't think I've either liked or been interested in anything Neton Vega's ever done that's charted. And then Peso Pluma feels increasingly removed from his big breakthrough, so another regional Mexican cut that I probably won't remember much didn't exactly raise any hopes on my end. Now, for what it's worth, the production value has increased substantially since both broke on the scene, with a more defined bass group that actually has some funkier flourishes on the interlude, and slightly more deliberate pacing around all the wailing trumpets. But when you translate the lyrics and you get a lot of the same flexing as usual amid some implied cheating, the slower tempo creates this melancholy vibe that all of this has gotten substantially less fun. Even still, I wouldn't call it precisely bad so much as a little bit dreary, not all that memorable. In other words, not remotely surprising from either of these two. Next, number 91, Hometown Home by LOCASH.
Girl, I'm down to go anywhere you wanna go, but if you wanna stay, I was thinking we could make this hometown home.
Okay, seriously, what are we even doing at this point? The last time I talked about LOCASH was in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, nearly 5 years ago, and that only happened nearly 5 years after the last time they charted in the mid-2010s. Is there any good reason why they're back again beyond them shifting labels, now apparently on their own with distribution through BBR? Well, apparently this song first dropped nearly a year ago, and now here we are, and oh my god, I wish I was remotely surprised by any of this. Filmy trap snares pressed into the overly sanitized production with the big auto-tune backing vocals that suck out any organic warmth from the guitars or the pedal steel trying to cut through. It just sounds so dated and sterile to me. Then there's the content, where LOCASH lists a bunch of places that they could move, but really, you know what he's been thinking? That all that seems like way too much work. He's got the idea, why don't they just make their hometown their home? Let's not do anything, the song. And look, I get some of the enthusiasm, I'll try to be charitable. The frontman's certainly trying to sell it with some upbeat passion, and I get the draw of familiarity. If you're trying to move, moving's hard, but so much of the signposts that LOCASH used to try to evoke familiarity feels so general and basic in comparison with all the possibilities that are out of view that they describe in the song. The other side of a track like this is More Than My Hometown by Morgan Wallen, and at least he got the messy emotional complexity somewhat right. In other words, derivative, dated, just not interesting. Sounds a lot like LOCASH to me. You can skip this. Number 90, Back to Friends by Sombr.
Friends, when we just shared a bed. How can you look at me and pretend I'm someone you never met?
Well, this has been somewhat in coming for a couple of weeks now. Sombr is a young singer-songwriter slash producer, originally out of New York, now LA. He's signed to Warner, and he's seen some buzz just below the charts for a decent bit, especially with the debut EP back in 2023 and some TikTok traction. I mean, with that stage name, it's not exactly surprising. But again, I've seen him chart in both Canada and the UK, and what surprised me is that he's not quite the stock emo sad boy that would have blown up in the late 2010s. His sound is considerably more spacious, stuffed with layered vocal overdubs over a piano-accented supple groove, where you can trace some of his influences from Harry Styles to Tame Impala, maybe even a bit of the New Radicals in that falsetto. There is something late 90s here in the bleary grandiosity that I kind of found pretty compelling. And by the time that gentle chug of the guitar and the ponderous bass came in, yeah, I was kind of hooked. Then we got the lyrics. And I don't know. I get feeling frustrated and confused when the relationship is obviously disintegrating as she's moving on and not that into you, just wants to be friends and he's not happy about it. But this treads the line right up to the petulance. And while he seems to find some sort of resigned acceptance, it leads to kind of an odd contrast with the sound. In short, you know what, I hear what could work with this. It's pretty intriguing, all things considered. And Sombr had a lot more talent and artistic development than many TikTok upstarts. He's got potential. Now, if this becomes a hit, you know, I'm curious what will happen next. Pretty damn good. I want to hear more. Number 81, Love Me Not by Ravyn Lenae.
Right here. Oh, it's hard to leave you when I get you everywhere. All this time I'm thinking we could never be a pair. Oh no, I don't need you, but I miss you. Come here.
Now, Ravyn Lenae, I'm very familiar with. I reviewed her last 2 albums, and while I'm considerably cooler on her material than a lot of critics, this is one of the stronger songs from that project last year, built off of DJ Dahi's rickety percussion, a more forceful bass line, and a shuffling patter where Lenae's sweeter vocals are partially buried behind a scratchy filter, well, at least before her backing vocals have a softer and cleaner fidelity, which only enhances how infectious that hook is. I can't say I like the oddly tinny and oily synth on the bridge, and there is a part that was kind of reminded of the insane catty earworm from the short-lived girl group Dream, He Loves You Not. That is the first time you have thought about that song in decades, and if you remember it, it's now firmly stuck in your head. You're welcome. But this feels just as catchy, and the frustrated confusion of trying to figure out where you actually sit in a conflicted back and forth relationship when you don't have a clean idea where the other person even is, well, that kind of fits the circling progression of the song. I'll call it effective. Won't say it's my favorite from the album, or even the best representation of Ravyn Lenae to the broader population. I prefer her stuff a little bit more soft focus and R&B like from that first project, but you know what? This is a good song. I'll take it. Number 63, Vanish Mode by Lil Durk.
Bitches know ain't no finesse in me. Arrogant, my bitch a masterpiece. Famous bitches was harassing me. Freaky bitches wanna line a piece. Fuck the good, I couldn't find the keys. Bitch say she love me, she lying to me.
What do you know? The biggest song from the Lil Durk project just so happens to be the worst. Although I get why it charted the highest. The piano and chintzy strings, that's catchy, and I think the melodic cadence against the sharper trap percussion, that works too, especially when you only have the one verse bracketed by the hooks. But dear God, there is a sentiment that's building traction that if Lil Durk, he'll often be his own worst enemy on songs like this with some truly abysmal lines. He's never been good rapping about women, and that is just as true here. From judging the girls he fucks based off of their nails and teeth, gross, to how she's waxing her pussy, it's better to eat. I get what you're trying to refer to, but it sounds awkward. To how he treats the bitch like his daughter, although I think the implication in the following line is that she will never get treated as well as his daughter. But I thought the arc of this project was partially about celebrating his relationship with India Royale. They just got married. This feels rather incongruous to that. I think what's more distracting is how utterly disjointed this track is, leaping from bad sex references to drug abuse to relationship instability to flexing, and none of it connects well. Feels very rushed and awkward, especially whenever he tries to show some sort of chivalry like he's a good guy, and it's flagrantly unconvincing in contrast to everything else. Yeah, in other words, ain't good. Next, number 38, Dandelion by Ariana Grande.
Wishlist, you can get anything you like. I'll be a dandelion.
You know, when I first heard that sweet horn line open up the song, I had the hope this might tilt more into soul or something a bit more organic. So naturally, instead, we get the horn chopped into a loop around the lumbering bass and the watery trap rattles, where I might like how her vocals are mastered compared to the rest of these bonus tracks that sound a little bit more lush, especially as the overdubs come in. But why does the rest of the production sound this canned and colorless? And why leave the horn buried at the very back on the bridge? It doesn't accentuate the melody. And how how does this work for a love song focused on being that dandelion where Ariana Grande can grant wishes for this new paramour? The song doesn't sound airy or floral, it doesn't fit the symbolism at all, it's just kind of an awkward pairing. Kind of a shame because that main vocal line is catchy. I think there's a hook here, I get why it's charting, but it's depressing that it's probably the trap elements that caused this to chart higher than the other, better, more interesting songs from Ariana Grande. Well, with one exception. Finally, number 18, Twilight Zone by Ariana Grande.
So strange, 'cause I never do, not that I miss you, I don't. Sometimes I just can't believe you happened.
Hey, you know what? When you get Max Martin for production on this song, laser focused on the kiss off of the ex, or she's sick and tired of protecting his identity in these songs, instead of making your singles run targeting the media instead, you're going for that hit, plain and simple. And when you get that watery 90s R&B synth line backing that gentle patter and swells of strings as the overdubs punch in through the twinkles on the hook, she's got some gold here. I hear a bit of the Mariah influence, which is why the production of the vocals is so goddamn frustrating. You have a gorgeous voice that doesn't need the sort of electronic deflection to sell the emotions. Why dump on all the oily effects and compression where you could let your gorgeous lower to mid register saturate the mix? Do what Mariah Carey did. It's kind of a shame because while the rest of the song dwells in this frustrated confusion, less not being over this guy and more how could she have let this happen to herself, it feels like there's a level where this really could have soared and instead just content to lock in the mid-range. In other words, it is a pretty strong pop song, kind of puts me in the same mind as We Can't Be Friends. I'm just saying it could have been great. That's all. And yeah, that's the week. Kind of a weird one, but at least the worst fall out fast, with Hometown Home by LOCASH taking that bottom spot, and Dishonourable Mention going to Vanish Mode by Lil Durk. Best of the week? Honestly, it was a little tricky. There was more competition than I expected, but I think Twilight Zone by Ariana Grande takes the top spot, just edges out Back to Friends by Sombr as the honorable mention. Although that latter song does have me really intrigued for whatever might be coming next. Kind of hope it picks up some traction. And next week, honestly, I don't know at all. I think whatever aftermath in this wake might be kind of intriguing. Stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.